Have you ever looked in the mirror and realized you are looking at a stranger, not because you do not recognize your face, but because the life you are living feels entirely disconnected from the person you were supposed to become? What if the heavy exhaustion you feel every day is not because you are failing, but because you are carrying the ghost of a life that was never meant to be yours? There is a profound, quiet grief in this realization. It is not the loud, shattering grief of losing a loved one. It is a slow, silent mourning for the unlived life. You wake up, you go through the motions, and somewhere in the back of your mind, a voice whispers that you missed your exit. You think about the goals you were sure you would achieve by now, the relationships you believed would last, the version of yourself you imagined years ago, standing confidently in a future that somehow never arrived. The gap between who you expected to be and who you are right now feels like a vast ocean, and you are emotionally drowning trying to swim across it. But here is the truth few people want to face. Most of your suffering does not come from being lost. It comes from how tightly you are holding onto the map of a place you no longer live. Buddhist wisdom teaches us about the deeply painful nature of attachment. Often, we think of attachment as clinging to physical possessions or forcing people to stay in our lives. But the most destructive attachment is clinging to an illusion of who we are supposed to be. In Buddhist thought, the self is not a rigid statue carved out of stone. It is a river, constantly flowing, constantly shifting, and adapting to the terrain it passes over. We suffer because we create a fixed, rigid blueprint for our lives in our minds, and we confuse that blueprint with reality. When our actual life does not perfectly match the drawing, we abandon our present self. We punish the person we are right now for not being the ghost we constructed in our heads. Imagine a strong tree that spent its early years trying to grow completely straight, reaching only upward toward a single patch of sunlight. But as the years pass, the fierce wind pushes against it, the soil shifts, and another taller tree blocks its light. To survive, the tree must bend. It must twist its branches outward, stretching in new, unexpected directions to find warmth. If the tree refuses to bend, if it insists on growing only the exact way it originally intended, it will snap and break. Its true beauty is not found in its rigid straightness. Its beauty is found in its survival, in the unique, unrepeatable shape it had to take just to find the light. Think about your own life. We do the exact same thing. We hold on against a flat memory of who we thought we would be. And when our branches have to twist to survive the storms of our lives, we call ourselves failures. Ask yourself, who are you truly mourning? Are you grieving a real part of yourself? Or are you just mourning the expectations you gathered from the world around you? Stop, breathe, let that sink in. You do not have to apologize for not becoming the person you imagined. You are not a broken version of that person. You are something far more real. You are here. But letting go of who you were supposed to be is only the first step, because releasing that ghost means you must suddenly carry the heavy weight of the expectations that were left behind. And this is where the next truth begins. 2. The heavy weight of who you were supposed to be. What if the deep exhaustion you feel in your bones is not from doing too much, but from carrying something that was never yours to hold? Here is a truth that is difficult to face. The person you were supposed to be was rarely an idea that came from you. From the time we are very young, we begin collecting expectations. We are told what success looks like, how love should happen, and when we should have our lives entirely figured out. We learn to become people pleasers, quietly altering our shape to fit the molds handed to us by our parents, our peers, and society. You convince yourself that if you just follow the script, you will finally feel secure. But instead, you feel anxious, trapped, and constantly afraid of failure. You replay conversations, wondering if you said the right thing to maintain this fragile image. You try to force someone to stay, or force a career to work, desperately trying to control the timing of your life to match a schedule that someone else wrote. Buddhism reminds us that much of our inner turmoil comes from carrying the heavy burden of these artificial identities. One of the deepest lessons of Buddhist thought is the understanding of non-attachment to the ego. The roles we play, the successful achiever, the perfect partner, the one who never fails, are not our true selves. They are temporary clouds drifting across a vast sky. But when we attach our entire self-worth to these passing clouds, we suffer the moment the wind changes direction. We suffer because we are trying to nail a cloud to the sky. Imagine you are walking a long, steep path up a mountain. As you walk, people along the trail hand you heavy stones. One stone is a family expectation. Another is a societal standard of wealth. Another is a rigid timeline of when you should be married or settled down, because you want to be loved, because you fear being rejected or left behind. You dutifully place every single stone into your bag. Years go by. Your shoulders ache. Your knees are buckling. You can barely take another step. You look around at others and think, "Why am I so tired? I must be weak. I must be failing at the climb." But you are not weak. The climb is not defeating you. You are simply carrying a bag filled with rocks that do not belong to you. Think about how this shows up in your everyday life. You look at a screen, see someone else's curated success, and quietly slip another stone of comparison into your bag. You sit at a family gathering, absorbing their unspoken questions about your future, and you add another stone of guilt. You exhaust yourself at a job you do not even enjoy, chasing a title just to prove to the world that you are worthy of respect. Ask yourself, whose life are you trying to live? If you took out every expectation that was handed to you by the world, what would be left in your hands? What are you afraid will happen if you finally set the bag down? Pause, breathe, observe the heavy expectations you are holding on to today. You do not have to carry them all. Let the feeling of inadequacy rise without making it your identity. You do not need to perform for an audience that is not even paying attention. You are allowed to travel light. You are allowed to let the false image fall away. But when you finally put those heavy stones down, a strange panic often follows. Without the pressure of who you were supposed to be, you might suddenly feel untethered, looking around and wondering if everyone else has somehow passed you by. And this is where the next truth begins. 3. The illusion of falling behind. What if the panic you feel about being behind in life is based entirely on a race that does not exist? Here is the truth that few people want to accept. The tighter you hold onto a timeline, the more you suffer. We live in a world obsessed with milestones. You are told you must figure out your career by a certain age, find love by a certain year, and have something impressive to show for your time on earth. When your life does not match this invisible schedule, a quiet terror sets in. You look at your peers advancing, buying homes, or moving forward, and you feel a crushing sense of failure. You feel like you missed the boat. You scroll through carefully curated images of other people's joy, and the loneliness deepens. You spend your nights worrying about the future, wondering why everyone else seems to have the secret to moving forward while you are just treading water in the dark. But Buddhist wisdom offers a profoundly different view of time and progress. In Buddhist thought, the universe does not operate on a straight line, nor does it measure success by speed. The natural world operates in cycles, seasons, and rhythms. One of the deepest lessons of Buddhism is acceptance of the present moment exactly as it is, without projecting our anxieties onto the future. We suffer when we impose a human-made clock onto a spiritual journey. To find peace, we must practice non-attachment, not just to things, but to our rigid expectations of when things should happen. Imagine a seed buried deep in the cold, dark earth. For weeks, months, or even years, nothing appears on the surface. If you were to judge the seed by what you can see, you would think it is entirely stuck. You might even think it is dead. Above ground, other plants have already sprouted, bloomed, and grown tall in the warm sun. But the seed is not failing. It is not falling behind. In the total darkness, it is doing the invisible, grueling work of breaking open. It is growing deep, sturdy roots that will eventually allow it to stand through violent storms. If the seed tried to rush its growth to keep up with the flowers around it, it would sprout without a foundation, and it would wither in the first strong wind. Think about your own life. We demand instant blooming from ourselves. We feel the pressure to succeed so intensely that we abandon our own roots just to look like we are growing on the surface. We compare our quiet, necessary winter to someone else's vibrant summer. Ask yourself, are you actually falling behind, or are you just walking a path that takes longer because it goes deeper? What if this long period of feeling stuck is not a failure, but the exact darkness you need to build the foundation for who you are truly meant to become? Stop, breathe. Stop trying to force the door open. Let the feeling of urgency rise and pass without making it your master. Do your part, put in your quiet effort, and then release the outcome. Because peace is not found in crossing a finish line before everyone else. Peace is found when you realize there is no race. But when you finally stop running and the dust settles, the silence left behind can feel overwhelming. Without the distraction of chasing a timeline, you must look around the quiet room and finally face the person you have been ignoring. And this is where the next truth begins. 4. Meeting the stranger within. What if the person you have been running from your entire life is not an enemy, but yourself? Here is the truth that often feels terrifying. We are afraid of silence because we are afraid of who we will meet in the quiet. When you spend years trying to become someone else, carefully constructing a life based on outside expectations, your true self is pushed into the shadows. You fill your days with noise. You work late. You scroll mindlessly through screens. You jump from one task to the next, and you constantly seek approval. You do this because if you stop moving, if you stop producing, you will have to face the emptiness. You will have to face the hollow ache that despite doing everything right, you still feel completely disconnected. And when the timeline finally drops away, when you are left alone in a quiet room, the person staring back at you feels like a total stranger. You do not know what they want. You do not know what brings them real joy. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that the path to peace begins with radical presence. One of the deepest lessons of Buddhism is the practice of observing the mind without judgment. We suffer because we reject parts of ourselves that do not fit our ideal image. We treat our own genuine, unpolished inner voice as an intruder. But true mindfulness means letting go of the fear of our own authenticity. It means creating a calm space where the self that has not yet had permission to speak can finally be heard, without us rushing to silence it or force it to change. Imagine a deep, ancient lake surrounded by mountains. On a clear, silent night, the surface of the water perfectly reflects the brilliant light of the moon. But if you stand at the edge and constantly throw heavy stones into the water, the surface violently churns. The reflection fractures into 1,000 jagged pieces. You look at the chaotic water and think the moon is shattered. You think the lake is broken. But the moon is not broken, and the lake is not flawed. The reflection is simply distorted by your own frantic movements. Think about your own life. We spend our days throwing stones into the waters of our minds. We throw stones of anxiety, comparison, work stress, and the need to be liked. We churn the water so violently that our true reflection becomes distorted and completely unrecognizable. You think you are broken. You think you have permanently lost who you were supposed to be. But you are not lost. You are just agitated. You have simply forgotten how to be still. Ask yourself, what are you avoiding when you refuse to sit in silence? What is the heavy feeling you are trying to outrun by staying so endlessly busy? Are you afraid that if you finally look into the still water, you will not like the person looking back? Pause. Breathe. Sit with the silence for just one moment today. Do not reach for a distraction. Let the feeling of discomfort rise without running away from it. Observe the thought without following it. You do not need to fix the stranger inside you. You just need to introduce yourself. You just need to stop throwing stones, because peace is not found by constantly escaping your life. It is found by finally making room for it. But meeting this stranger is only the beginning. Once the water stills and the true reflection appears, you will feel the sudden urge to look away and abandon yourself again. And this is where the next truth begins. 5. The courage to stay when you want to run. What if the bravest thing you can ever do is simply refuse to leave your own side? Here is the truth we constantly try to escape. The sudden urge to run away is rarely about the place you are in. It is almost always about the feeling you are trying not to feel. When we finally begin to face the stranger within, the silence can become painfully loud. You start to feel the old wounds, the unresolved grief of the unlived life, and the sting of past rejections. The discomfort becomes so heavy that your immediate instinct is to flee. You want to withdraw. You build invisible walls. You sabotage relationships the moment they become difficult, or you quietly shut down when people get too close. You look at your daily life, feel overwhelmed by the pressure, and convince yourself that if you just start over in a new city, a new job, or a new relationship, the deep ache will finally stop. But Buddhist wisdom teaches us that you cannot outrun your own mind. In Buddhist thought, much of our suffering comes from aversion, the desperate, exhausting attempt to push away anything that feels unpleasant. We believe that if we escape the external situation, we will escape the internal pain. But true mindfulness asks us to do the exact opposite. It asks us to stay. It reminds us that emotions are like passing weather, and our true self is the vast sky. You do not have to run from a dark cloud when you realize you are the open sky that holds it. Imagine a small wooden boat moving through rough, dark water. A fierce storm suddenly rolls in. The wind howls, and the waves crash violently against the sides of the heavy wood. The sailor panics. Terrified of the turbulent water and the loss of control, they abandon the helm and try to jump overboard, desperately hoping to swim to a peaceful shore. But jumping into the freezing, chaotic sea only guarantees they will drown. The only way to survive the storm is to stay in the boat, to hold the wheel steady, feel the violent rocking, and let the boat ride the heavy waves until the morning sun finally breaks through the clouds. Think about your own life. We jump out of our boats all the time. When a conversation gets hard, you shut down and refuse to speak. When you feel ignored or undervalued, you defensively push people away before they can leave you. You abandon your own heart the moment it begins to ache, seeking out endless distractions, social media, or hollow comforts, just to avoid feeling the violent rocking of your own emotions. Ask yourself, where in your life are you currently trying to escape? What are you truly running from? Are you afraid that if you finally sit still and let the sadness or the fear wash over you, it will completely destroy you? Stop, breathe, stay in the boat. Let the wave rise, crash, and pass without becoming the wave. You do not have to fight the storm, but you must stop jumping into the freezing water, because peace is not found by searching the world for a place with no storms. It is found by learning how to anchor yourself in the rough water. But staying requires more than just endurance. It requires you to finally make room for the quiet, fragile part of yourself that you have been talking over for years. And this is where the next truth begins. 6. Making space for the quiet voice. What if the reason you feel so lost is not because you do not know the way, but because the voice that knows the way has been forced into silence? Here is a truth that is hard to face. We often treat our own true self worse than we would ever treat a stranger. We live our lives constantly talking over our own intuition. When you feel a quiet spark of joy doing something simple, your mind immediately rushes in with harsh logic. This does not pay the bills, or this is a waste of time. When you feel a deep, silent exhaustion begging you to rest, you drown it out with guilt and force yourself to keep pushing. You constantly seek validation from the outside world, asking everyone else what you should do with your life, while actively ignoring the fragile, authentic part of you that has been waiting to be heard. You have trained yourself to believe that if a desire does not sound loud, productive, or socially impressive, it does not deserve to speak. Buddhist wisdom teaches us the profound value of silence and deep listening. In Buddhist thought, the truest part of who we are does not shout, it does not argue, and it does not try to prove itself to the world. It simply is. We suffer because we crowd our minds with the loud, demanding voices of fear, ego, and societal conditioning, leaving no room for our authentic nature to breathe. Mindfulness is not just about paying attention to the present moment. It is about creating a vast, non-judgmental space where the suppressed parts of ourselves can finally emerge without fear of being criticized or rejected. Imagine a tiny, delicate bird trapped inside a loud, busy house. For years, the house has been filled with the deafening noise of televisions, slamming doors, and rushing footsteps. Terrified by the chaos, the bird hides in the darkest corner of the highest shelf. It stops singing, it stops moving. Eventually, you might even forget it is there. If you suddenly want the bird to come down and sing, you cannot stand in the middle of the room and shout at it. You cannot reach into the dark and pull it out by force. The only way the bird will ever leave the shadows is if you turn off the noise. You must sit perfectly still, leave a window open, and wait with endless patience until it finally feels safe enough to step into the light. Think about your own life. We demand that our true selves show up on command. We want immediate, clear answers about our careers, our relationships, and our purpose. And when we do not get those answers instantly, we get frustrated and fill the room with more noise, more scrolling, more working, more meaningless distractions. We keep the house so overwhelmingly loud that the quiet voice of our own intuition stays terrified in the dark. Ask yourself, when was the last time you let yourself simply exist without demanding that you be productive? What is the quiet voice inside you trying to say, beneath all the heavy layers of what you think you should be doing? Pause, breathe, stop demanding answers from the silence. Just sit in the quiet room and leave the door open. Let the thoughts settle. Because peace is not found by shouting over your confusion. It is found by listening to the stillness. But to truly hear that voice, you must first let go of the illusions that keep the room so loud. And this is where the next truth begins. 7. Stripping away the false promises. What if the finish line you are running toward is just an illusion painted by someone else? Here is the truth that breaks our hearts but eventually sets us free. You cannot find your true self by chasing false promises of future happiness. We live our lives trapped in an endless cycle of if and then. You tell yourself, if I get that promotion, then I will finally be respected. If I find the right partner, then I will no longer feel empty. If I finally reach this specific milestone, then I will give myself permission to rest. You spend your entire life treating the present moment as nothing more than a waiting room for a future that keeps getting delayed. You exhaust yourself chasing these external markers, but when you finally achieve them, the satisfaction only lasts a moment. The emptiness quickly returns, and the goalpost simply moves further away. You are left feeling completely disconnected, wondering why you still feel like a stranger in your own life. Buddhist wisdom teaches us to look closely at this illusion. In Buddhist thought, this endless craving for the next thing is the very root of our suffering. We attach our inner peace to external conditions that are fragile and constantly changing. We mistakenly believe that happiness is a permanent destination we can finally arrive at, lock the door, and keep forever. But the nature of all things is impermanent. As long as you believe that your worth and your peace exist somewhere in the future, you will always feel disconnected from who you are right now. True freedom begins when you realize that no external achievement can heal an internal abandonment. Imagine a tired traveler walking across a vast, scorching desert. In the distance, they see a shimmering lake of cool water. Desperate for relief, they start to run, but no matter how fast or how long they run, the water never gets closer. It is a mirage, a trick of the light reflecting off the hot sand. The tragedy is not just that the lake does not exist. The true tragedy is that in their desperate, exhausting sprint toward the illusion, the traveler completely ignored the life-saving canteen of water they were already carrying on their back. Think about your own life. How many times have you reached the mirage only to find more sand? You got the job title, but the daily anxiety remained. You bought the things you thought you needed, but the quiet loneliness followed you inside. You finally received the validation you craved from someone else, but the harsh critic in your own head did not stop talking. We constantly abandon our present breathing selves, hoping that a future, polished version of us will magically feel whole. We trade the reality of who we are for the false promise of who we think we should be. Ask yourself, what is the if-then promise you are still heavily chasing today? What future event are you waiting for before you finally give yourself permission to feel okay? What if the peace you are looking for is not waiting for you at the end of the race, but is already with you, simply waiting for you to stop running? Pause. Breathe. Notice the heavy expectation you have placed on the future. Do your part in life, but release the desperate need for the mirage to be real. Stop abandoning your present self for a future that does not yet exist, because peace is not a reward for arriving at a perfect destination. It is the quiet relief of realizing you no longer need to run. But stripping away these false promises leaves you entirely bare. It demands that you finally look at the quiet, untamed parts of your soul and let them live. And this is where the next truth begins. 8. Giving the unspoken self permission to breathe. What if the parts of you that you have hidden away are not your weaknesses, but your truest source of light? Here is a truth that requires great courage to face. The version of you that you have spent years suppressing is often the only version that can bring you real peace. Think about the pieces of yourself you have quietly locked away. The creative dream you abandoned because it did not seem practical. The boundaries you never set because you were too afraid of being disliked or rejected. The deep need for rest that you constantly ignore, just to prove your worth to people who are not even watching. You have spent so much energy trying to protect a false image of success that you have starved your true nature. You live in a constant state of internal compromise, whispering a quiet yes to the world, while your heart screams a desperate no. You have treated your deepest desires like dangerous secrets, keeping them hidden because you fear they are not enough, or perhaps that they are too much for others to handle. In Buddhist thought, we are reminded of the profound power of acceptance and non-judgment. Buddhism teaches us that true suffering comes from denying reality, including the reality of our own inner landscape. When we suppress our authentic thoughts and emotions, we create an internal war. We split ourselves in two, the polished person we show to the world, and the neglected soul shivering in the dark. But healing does not come from rewriting your past or forcing yourself to fit an old blueprint. It comes from integration. It comes from observing every part of your being, your fears, your hidden passions, your quiet grief with total, unwavering compassion. Imagine an old, heavy wooden door at the very end of a long, dark hallway inside your mind. For years, you have kept this door securely locked. You piled heavy boxes of work, social obligations, and constant distractions in front of it so you would never have to look at it. You told yourself that whatever was behind that door was too messy, too unfinished, or too deeply disconnected from the person you were supposed to become. But a locked door does not make the room disappear. The unspoken self remains there, patiently waiting in the dark. It does not rage. It does not fight. It simply waits for the day you finally stop running down the hallway. Walk up to the threshold and quietly turn the key. Think about how this shows up in your modern life. You sit in rooms, nodding along to things you do not truly believe in, just to avoid conflict. You stay in situations where you feel entirely invisible, convincing yourself that being misunderstood is better than being alone. You look at your screen, measuring your messy, beautiful, unpolished reality against the flawless, artificial timelines of strangers. Every time you do this, you turn the key a little tighter on your own heart. Ask yourself, what is the part of you that has not yet had permission to speak? What are you so desperately afraid will happen if you finally let that part of you be seen by the world? Is keeping that door locked truly keeping you safe? Or is it slowly suffocating your spirit? Stop, breathe, look toward that locked door without fear. You do not have to force it wide open today. Just clear away one box of distraction. Let the unspoken feeling rise to the surface, without judging it, without shaming it, and without trying to fix it. Give it permission to exist, just for this moment, because peace is not something you achieve by becoming a perfect statue of outside expectations. It is something you make space for by letting your real self breathe. And when you finally allow the unspoken self to step into the light, you realize you never actually lost your way. And this is where the final truth begins. 9. You have always been arriving. What if the person you see in the mirror is not a stranger who lost their way, but a survivor who finally made it home? We began this journey looking at the quiet grief of the unlived life, the deep, heavy exhaustion of realizing you feel totally disconnected from the person you were supposed to become. For years, you have carried the heavy stones of other people's expectations. You have constantly measured your quiet winter against everyone else's loud summer. You have fought the violent storms in your mind, and you have kept the most delicate parts of your soul locked behind a heavy wooden door. You believed that because your life did not perfectly match the blueprint you drew years ago, you had completely missed your exit. But here is the most beautiful truth of all. The person you were supposed to be never actually existed. It was only a ghost, a collection of shadows, borrowed dreams, and rigid timelines handed to you by a world that did not know your true heart. When you finally stop mourning the ghost, you make room for the living, breathing, beautifully complex human being standing right in front of you. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that true awakening is not about reaching a magical destination where your struggles disappear and your life is finally perfect. It is simply the profound, gentle realization that you are already here. The path of non-attachment means releasing the tight grip you have on the past and the future. It means accepting that you are not a rigid statue that failed to take shape. You are the river, constantly flowing, shifting, and carving a new, unrepeatable path through the earth every single day. Think of the tree that had to bend its branches just to find the light. Think of the seed that had to sit in total darkness just to build a foundation strong enough to survive the wind. Think of the delicate bird that only needed the overwhelming noise of the house to stop so it could finally step out of the shadows. None of them were falling behind. None of them were broken. They were simply doing exactly what they needed to do to live. And so are you. Ask yourself, can you finally forgive yourself for not becoming the illusion? Can you look at your unpolished, unpredictable, entirely real life and realize that it is worthy of your own love? Stop, breathe, look in the mirror one last time. You do not have to fight the reflection anymore. Put down the heavy bag of expectations. Stop throwing stones into the quiet water of your mind. You do not have to abandon yourself just to feel safe in this world. Make room for the quiet voice. Turn the key, open the door, and make space for the self that has patiently waited years for you to listen. You have not fallen behind. You have simply been taking the deep way around. If these lessons touched your heart, share this video with someone who may need a little more peace today. You have not missed your life. You are finally living it.